because the ultimate DEI, in fact, the only diversity, equity, and inclusion concept that I acknowledge historically is whiteness. Because only in whiteness can you be thoroughly unqualified for your job, Madam Press Secretary, Secretary of Defense, National Intelligence, Health and Human Services, Secretary of the Treasury. Only in whiteness can you be thoroughly unqualified, but in the diversity of whiteness, you get the equity of being able to bring your incompetent ass into a position, and you are included. So the only DEI that I recognize is whiteness. But what you're talking about with us is simply making fairness. When they say DEI, what we mean by that is fairness. But when we say DEI, what we mean is whiteness. That's the only diversity, equity, and inclusion. Whiteness is an illusion that everybody got included in.
Welcome. You are listening to Building the Black Educator Pipeline Podcast, the place where we talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. It's been a minute, y'all, but I am your host, Shayna Terrell, educator activist dedicated to the lifelong struggle of freedom and liberation for my people. Sorry, I've been gone for a minute, y'all. If you are a parent, you know what it's like. I am a quasi new mommy. I'm a year and a half in. So for my listeners, just chasing around a toddler, honey. That's the life right now. But there's been so much going on and so much happening. So I could not resist coming back to talk to you guys. And of course, I got my Baba, Dr. Greg Carr, Associate Professor at Howard University, host of In Class with Carr, and the Black Table on the Black Star Network. What's up, Dr. Carr?
Hey, Mama Shayna, a year and a half in.
Yes, of motherhood, chasing this toddler around. It's a lot going on.
Yeah, he chasing you around. He walking around, though. We saw him at the Black Male Educator Convening. That was his second one. He was an infant.
That was his second one.
Time.
Yes.
In the stroller, and now you walk running around,
acting crazy.
Next November, he's presenting.
That'll be dope. Adon's presenting, okay, on the state of education.
Oh,
he'll love
goodness.
It.
Well, since you, Mama Harriet, leading our people to liberation, I just got my hands on this book. It just came out this month, actually. Well, late last month. Harriet Tubman. This is new. This is actually by her great-great-grandniece and a co-author called Harriet Tubman, from her roots in Ghana to her legacy on the Eastern Shore. So they start in Africa. Finally, a Harriet Tubman book that starts the right place. So yeah, we got, you're going to have to read it and review it for us in a subsequent issue Building this Pipeline. So it just came out. In fact, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I said, wait a minute. Here, our Harriet is back, so let's put her sister on. So,
we're starting in true history, okay?
And
shout out to all our co-conspirators out there listening. Of course, we had to bring it back this month, and you segue right in with the right book, the celebration of Black History Month, the month where we celebrate ourselves, we celebrate our ancestors, we just celebrate Blackness. Now, we all know, you know how I feel, Black History Month is 365 days of the year. It ain't just 1 month, day, 1 week out the year.
That's right.
But it is a time where we all as a community recognize the dopeness of Blackness. So, we done did 11 episodes already on Black History Month, but always for our new listeners, I always ask you to give a brief history on Black History Month and how we started here.
How, let me ask you, for those who are new, who may not have seen this before, and there's a lot that has transpired, obviously, since we talked about this last year.
Absolutely.
Including the birth of a hashtag or a concept. I don't think it's real. But anyway, this TikTok University, is it Hillman Talk or something? Have you heard of that?
I have not. I'm not
okay,
an
good.
avid
Then
TikTok.
So I'm just saying, because they do these little bite-sized things on TikTok where they talk about history and then they call it a university. I'm like, that's cute. That's nice. That's novel. It's a nice advertisement. But so I guess it would be a 2-minute TikTok bite-sized version, because our master wizards, Jocelyn, could figure out how to cut and paste this to make it into, cut and paste is the wrong term, how to produce this so we can do it quickly. All right, let's see. Let me see if I can do this in like 60 seconds. Carr G. Woodson would say, the founder of Black History Month in 1926, that it is a brief period when we celebrate what we have studied and learned about our people the entire year, as you said. This year, I started calling February the Blackest History Month. Why? Because every month is Black History Month. This is the blackest because, all the other Black History Months get poured into the celebration in February. That's the way Woodson designed it. He drew inspiration from a number of sources. Two come immediately to mind. He put it as Negro History Week in 1926 because he put it in the birth week of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, trying to tie African people to the experiences here in the United States and kind of make it, he said, this isn't a Negro History Week, it's a Negro in History Week. We start with the origin of humanity, we come through to this very day, but we're tying it to where we are. And in that case, he being in the United States said that, global Black history in the U.S. context. But the Fred Douglass birthday is the fascinating one. Lincoln's birthday, we know, was February the 12th. Douglas's is February 14th, so-called Valentine's Day, because he didn't know when he was born on the eastern shore of Maryland, but his mother always referred to him as her Valentine, and he knew it was sometime in that time of the year. So he chose February 14th as the date. But that's not even the inspiration for Woodson. The inspiration actually was Black women. Mary Church Terrell in 1897 had proposed, living here in Washington, D.C., that the school children of D.C., the Black school children, of course, the school district was segregated at the time, should celebrate what she called Douglass Day. We should have Frederick Douglass's birthday off, and these Black school children home from school should learn about their history and culture. Well, a lot of people, and I'd be one of those people who would agree, because they all lived in this community. Mary McLeod Bethune, Mary Church Terrell, Carter Woodson, the great Nanny Helen Burroughs. He was surrounded by these Black women. That really becomes the point of entry for Woodson to say, okay, well, we got the 14th. Let's add Lincoln. Let's make it a week. And then he also drew inspiration from Omega Psi Phi, his frat brothers. They had asked him to become a voluntary, an honorary member. He'd agreed. And so then they started celebrating 2 years before. They started doing this kind of Negro history and reading period. So he then takes that too and expands it. And that's where it came from. So the second part of that story is very quick. We were celebrating Negro History Week for years, for decades. And then in the late 60s, during the Black Power movement, Black students on Black college campuses and white college campuses started pushing to expand it. Some of the earliest stirrings from that came from Ohio. Kent State University, Black students were like, let's do a month. And so, to this day, Black folk at Kent State University in Ohio, not far from Yellow Springs, Ohio, actually, where Dave Chappelle lives. His mother, Yvonne Sion, a great professor of African American history and culture, Pan-Africanist, brilliant sister. They all say that that's the beginning of Black History Month on the campus of Kent State. And there were other places. And then eventually, of course, the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History, Woodson's organization, adopts that. It becomes Black History Month. And then in 1974, the president, 76, the spring of 76, the president of the United States, Gerald Ford, issued a presidential proclamation, a little different than the one the current president is issuing. I'm not quite sure what he's doing. Well, he's signing his name on things. I'm pretty sure he hadn't read any of it. But Gerald Ford actually read and signed the proclamation in 1976, saying that this is a federally recognized celebration of Negro history in February. That was then, of course, now they're trying to cancel all the celebrations in the federal government, but that doesn't stop the people now, does it? So sign all your with your crayon marker, sign all your proclamations, President of the United States. We will go on and celebrate. You won't, but well, maybe you will. I don't know. We don't know what he does at night. But yeah, that's the history of Black history.
So this is an interesting concept, right? Like 2 points come up for me when we talk about this. One is, why the attacks on Black History Month? Like, why would people want to tear down a month where you're celebrating a culture or a people, right? You don't have to participate, but why attack it? Why try to block it? And then the second point I want to make to that is, we don't need people's permission to be Black. We don't need anybody's permission to celebrate Blackness. We don't need anybody's permission to celebrate greatness. So we don't need a proclamation. We don't need your work events to be able to establish who I am or what my peoples did or what my ancestors did. Like, you can't erase that. That can't be erased. It can't be undone. It is what it is. And I think in times like that, times like these, people need to center themselves in that. You don't need anybody's permission to be Black. You don't need anybody's permission to celebrate your history or who you are, our accomplishment, and the things that we do. We don't need permission to do that.
That's right.
And I think that's important.
It's harder to be put out of the race than it is to be put in the race. You know, black folk will let pretty much anybody that claims some black to be either in or around us. But to get put out the race, you almost have to, I don't know, I'm not sure what you have to do to get put out of race, Clarence Thomas, but you know, I guess he's not out of the race. That's what I'm saying. You can do whatever you want. Your political ideology, blackness wasn't created by black people. So in terms of asking permission to do something, no, you almost have to ask permission not to be put in blackness. I mean, we look at all the current administration's appointments, high-level cabinet appointments of black people, and you wait. Oh no, I guess there aren't any. So I mean, I guess it's hard.
So when you said it, I was like,
yeah, right.
I'm
Sorry, Byron Donald. I mean, all that
caping.
caping, brother. I mean, I'm sorry. This is Tim Scott. I guess you. But the whole point is, it's hard to not be black. So the idea that we get you had to get permission not to be black. And so I think the fear, the anxiety, and then the attacks come from the deep insecurity that racism engenders. If you're a racist, much of your identity is wrapped around the idea that you're not somebody else. So then you spend a great deal of your time and your energy trying to police that not somebody so that you can feel good about yourself. Now, you know, we're human beings in the world. Live and let live. Everybody said we got different religions, cultures, people, you know, get together, had children from every background. We're not talking about cats and dogs. We're talking about humans. So if you're human, you can reproduce. We got all kind of people. The people are saying there are 2 black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. And Patrick Mahomes and what's the brother? Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts. Don't say what's the brother. That is the brother.
Well,
okay?
You know, some people might say there's only 1 black quarterback in the Super Bowl, but that's not true. There are 2. Why? Because I don't care what Patrick Mahomes says or does. I don't care what his mom and his sister do or who they vote for or don't vote for. Brother, you black. We don't have, you know, you don't need anybody's permission to be black. Why? Because you are trapped in a racial paradigm the same as we are. So if you're going to be in it, and I'll take a quote from the great Guyanese thought leader, as people might say these days, historian more accurately, Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney said, as long as we live in a society that groups us as black and then tries to punish us for it, that's as long as we will take that label and turn it into a weapon for our liberation. So black is really a political term. It's not really a racial term. There's an attempt to racialize it by those who find comfort in whiteness. And that isn't all white people. As James Baldwin reminds us, these are people who think they are white. There are no white people or no black people in the world. They're ideologies. And so really what we're talking about is a subset of people who have grabbed a label and tried to weaponize it as an ideology to make themselves feel better. And the minute you drop that ideology, you'll free yourself because we are going to free ourselves. So maybe you should join us and free yourself. But as long as you're in that fever dream, God bless you. Because, you know, life is short and I don't have a whole lot of time to be arguing with people who don't think I'm human. I know I'm human. I don't have to prove it to you. So, yeah.
Yes. So what do you say to people who say you don't need a Black History Month? There's no White History Month.
I would say that every month is White History Month. Every day of every minute of every hour of every day of every month of every year is white history. The fact that we even say history, the word history from the Greek historia, which means to know by writing. The idea that anybody who doesn't write things down doesn't have history means that the entire world never had history until somebody started writing things down. And then that philosophy then leads to the idea that, well, the Greeks wrote and then the Romans wrote and then all the people from Europe wrote. The Africans invented writing. And along with the Chinese who also invented paper, and we invented paper, and people around the world invented these things. But before there was writing, there was mouth to ear history, and everybody did it that way. But when we say the word history, it evokes a notion of white men or people who are constructed as white, sitting around in togas, scribbling down on pad. No, even the language. We're speaking the English language. That's white history. We're not speaking Kiswahili or Yoruba, or we're not speaking, Hausa. We're not speaking Igbo or Bibio. We're speaking English. Why? Because the English came out of Western Eurasia and following the French, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, colonized as much of the world as they could. And so when we talk about Western history or Western civilization in school, world history, it's the history of Europe with a few little add-ons. They may drop a little Egypt, Mesopotamia, maybe a little China and some indigenous, but ultimately it's the history of all the explorers we learned in elementary school that weren't Chinese or African or indigenous. No, it's Pizarro and Cortez and all these people and Ferdinand Magellan. Well, what just happened? Amerigo Vespucci, Christopher Columbus. What? The narrowness of how we think about our common humanity gives evidence to the fact that every day is white history. So in some ways, you can look at Black History Month as a defense mechanism. It's a defense mechanism. As Jacob Corellis used to say, we have to fight our way back into history. Otherwise, I mean, it shouldn't be that way, but what we're going to do, just sit around and let you put a stamp in our mind to say that Black people never did anything?
And control our narrative.
Control our narrative. That's how you end up with a whole group of people who think that the top of their standard of excellence is singing and throwing a ball through a hoop. That's not natural. That's socialization. So yeah, every day is White History Month, White History Day.
So there are these T-shirts out now, right? Having this conversation makes me think of, or more of a slogan out now that says, slavery is not our history, that's white history. Meaning we, of course, predate slavery, but to tell our story at the start of slavery is how white people have chosen to carry and collect the narrative of Black people. And what made me think of this, yes, you talk about Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, look
right?
at that. Yes. Yes. Come on.
When you talk about Harriet Tubman, people know her as, the woman who freed all these slaves, which again, major accomplishment. But she was a person before and after that, and we don't know anything about her life prior to that, and we know nothing. I mean, people, all right, after she freed the slaves, what happened to Harriet? Can somebody tell a story about what happened to Harriet after slavery was done? Like, what did she do? Where did she go? How did the people take care of her? How was she revered? Like, did any of that happen? Nobody knows a story about Harriet besides she freed slaves.
How about that?
You know her story. That you are a historian.
Yeah.
But
and we should all know it.
But it's not, because it's not told and it's not taught and it's not none of that.
That would make us fully human. And remember, racism requires dehumanizing people. Even when people are being celebrated, they have to be celebrated relative to whiteness. So Harriet Tubman enters white memory as a courageous general who freed the slaves instead of a daughter, a sister, an auntie, a mother, a wife, a human being. And fleshing that then destroys the idea that African people were somehow just this group of poor, suffering people that dropped out of the sky, naked in chains, talking about give us free. So it becomes a problem. They say, I grab the book again because it's fascinating. This is a picture that you don't see a whole lot. This is Harriet Tubman in 1908. There she is in Auburn, New York. She's coming because what her family wanted to do is show her the answer to that question. And after she made transition, they have her funeral in here. They named a World War II ship after her, 2 ships actually. Now I don't know how I feel about this. This is several statues of Harriet Tubman, including the Ed Dwight statue that are around, including in Brooklyn, New York, and different places, in Annapolis, Maryland, of course, here not too far from here in Washington, D.C. But there's also a statue of her that was commissioned for the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. They claim her as the first spy of African descent because of what she did in the Civil War. Now, I mean, we can debate about whether that's a good or a bad thing, but even the CIA said we're going to claim everybody using Harriet Tubman for their own use. But here, this is one of the beautiful things that I love to see here. Here's a statue of Harriet Tubman and 2 children. This statue is in Ghana. Why? Because they have brought her statue, her image to Ghana. Why? Because her people came from Ghana. Araminta was the name that she was known by as a child, or Minty. That is her nickname. And her descendant, Pauline Johnson, was installed in Ghana because they say that your ancestor is like a queen mother to us because her people came from this region. She knew where she came from. And so we don't know the full story of Harriet Tubman because it overflows the boundaries of comfort in this country. People want to think of Black people as just these poor creatures and who were slaves and then they were free. And so that makes America feel good about itself. Look how far we've come. No, as John Henry Clark used to say, if you start your history with slavery, everything since then looks like progress. But I am not going to be yoked to James Madison. and Thomas Jefferson. I don't care what little musicals come out, and I'm not gonna be linked to George Washington. You're not my dad. Now, Harriet Tubman, in fact, I don't even know if this book had come out. I'm gonna pick it up. I keep it on the shelf. I'm gonna have to make some room for the other one on Harriet Tubman, the new one. This is a big old book. This book is 700 some pages called Combi. This is Harriet Tubman. This is the beautiful painting of her by William Johnson. This is on what the single greatest act of liberating human beings, a single act in this country that was undertaken by a woman of African descent. It's a place called the Combahee River in South Carolina. Now, people may have heard about the raid where the Union soldiers came down and freed all these Black people. She is the one who led the raid. It's called Combahee. This is Etta Fields Black, the good sister Etta Fields Black. You see how thick this book is. People talk, but what she's writing about is not just Harriet Tubman directing troops in battle. The first woman to do that in U.S. history, but they're talking about all the people, their descendants. They didn't just free themselves and die. They had children, and they had children, and they had children. Just like 100 years from now, when Adonis is sitting somewhere at 102 years old, talking to his great-great-great-great-grand, he's talking about us. Yeah, I knew those Negroes. I knew them. Let me tell you about what it was like in 2025. Are you sure? That was a long, that was like, yeah, I'm going to tell you about it, though. I mean, the same thing happened with her. She had two husbands. She got remarried. Her first husband's name was Tubman, John Tubman, but her name was Araminta Ross on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. You know what I'm saying? It's a beautiful thing.
So the fact that people don't even know what her real name is insane. That she has been reduced to what we would Harriet Tubman is a figure, like a symbol.
That's right. And it's important to be that, but she's so much more.
But she is way more than that. The fact that people don't even know her real name to me is insane. But again, when you talk about history, historical pieces, like one of the things that ring out in my mind sometimes is like, why do I need to know that George Washington chopped down a cherry tree? Right? Like why?
Or is alleged to do it.
Or alleged to do it. But why is that a thing?
Why is that a thing? Because you got to establish he's a good person, even as he had the teeth of captive human beings in his mouth as an adult.
Well, that, and when they tell you history, right? They don't tell you that, right? You don't learn in school that he owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. They don't talk about that. But so even when you're telling slavery as a history, you don't talk about the people who were actually owning us. Why is that not of a conversation? We were not slaves; we were enslaved. So we just decided to chain ourselves. Like that's like why is there no stories on who owned who? Like if you're gonna tell it all.
How about
tell it all?
Can't tell it all. You tell it all, it upsets the balance. See, this is a family-friendly podcast, so I can't say the direct quote of what Amiri Baraka once said. He said, "Yeah, like you change your own Black behinds and threw them in the bottom of the boat." Exactly. You know what? Let's go to America. Give me some chains. What? No. We were enslaved, and to the point you're raising, human beings were captured. Human beings were traded. I've gotten to the point now at this big age that I try to ease out of even using the word slavery to use a common word that puts it closer to everybody. Not to abandon that word because it's the word that people are most familiar with. But what if we call it, instead of enslavement, human trafficking? These are human beings. Y'all were the biggest human traffickers in world history. And instead of enslaved or slavery, why don't we say captives? We were captives. We never stopped being human.
Captive is definitely. But human trafficking is that's a good
we were human trafficked. And then we don't have to fight our way out of a label. Y'all were slaves. No, we were human. We never stopped being humans. We were human trafficked. And guess what? There were other humans who trafficked us. Let's talk. No, because once you say slave, now we're almost like in a subcategory of human that you never fight your way out of. Because the minute you accept that concept, here in the 21st century, people looking at you like, oh, wow, you're pretty fast. You know what? Roll the ball over there. Throw this ball. Let me see what happens. Because in your mind, that's the value of an ex-slave. Entertainment, labor. No, I'm a human like you're a human. Is your child playing ball? No, then I'm not playing ball either. What's your child doing? I'm going to follow your child. Is your child got an iPad in her hand at 3 months old? No, then my child isn't either. Oh, wait a minute. All the people in Silicon Valley, your children aren't allowed to get on devices until they're 5 or 6 years old. Then neither are mine. Why you keep making my children do stuff that your children do? Oh, you still see me as a slave.
Oh, Doc, that's a whole nother conversation, an episode, especially now being a new mom, the disparities of what they think that Black parents should be doing for their kids versus others. Even the conversations about like breastfeeding children and the lack of education. Yeah, that's when we can have a whole nother conversation.
No, but I want to hear at least 15, 20 seconds of it. What's the difference between Black and other in terms of breastfeeding?
They will try to push things on you again that aren't healthy for your child and that like your child doesn't need. Oh, formula, cow's milk.
No way.
Why is the conversation strange about a Black mom, breastfeeding to the age of your kid 3 or 4, which is a natural thing to do.
Yeah.
But you think it's okay for me to give my baby milk from somebody else's cow, like a cow, right? Another species, right? Like if I'm producing what my child should be drinking, but in your mind, it's okay for me to feed my child something from a whole nother species.
Wow.
That science has proven that we all know, like our bodies don't have the enzymes all the time to decompose and break that stuff down, which is why it gives people. It's supposed
to come from you.
Gastro.
You are literally engineered for that. That's what
I am built for this. I'm supposed to be giving my child this.
Yes.
So if I'm going to the doctor and there's questions about like when is he going to be on whole milk, he's not. He may not ever drink whole milk.
No
right?
Question.
He may go straight from breast milk to a different type of milk, maybe cashew milk, maybe water, maybe he just get vitamin D drops. I don't know.
That was me.
But not gonna poison, my child, and the fact that through a medical institution that you pushing the poison. But when I tell you it's insane, it's insane.
That's race. That's how race operates. No, yeah, my mama breastfed all 3 of us. In fact, she fed me until, as she used to tell the story before she became an ancestor, I bit her and she threw me on the bed and I started laughing. That's the end. But right now, but I never, no cow's milk. No, they won't dance that dance. No, ma'am, not Catherine Carr's child. So, and that's the way it's supposed to be,
But when you think about the Black education, Black history, Black communalism, Black celebration, and how those things have been broken, and there's so many efforts to kind of stomp it down. So even when I'm thinking about the fight for Black history and the fight against Black history, right? Some of the things that we're fighting for are some of the symbolic things that we're talking about. Like people want to fight like, no, because our kids got to know Harriet Tubman. We need to be fighting harder for our kids to know Araminta Ross. Like that's the fight that needs to be had.
That's the fight.
Different things like that. Different things about our history, our nature, what's common, the education that we know to be true as a people and for us. Those are the things that we should be fighting for, in my opinion,
I agree.
During this time.
I agree.
So as folks are in the uproar about some of these executive orders that are coming out.
There's some executive, yes. Yes. The executive orders can be very important. People might not remember 2 of the most important executive orders for African people in the United States. There was an order, Executive Order AA02, which was Franklin Roosevelt, as World War II was starting. That's how a lot of people ended up in the North. The Great Migrations were spurred because the industries, the auto industries, the manufacturing industries in the United States, many of them were segregated either by law or by practice. And as the war ramped up, it was clear that they were going to need a lot of tanks and planes and cars and stuff. And so the industries were retooling to produce millions of units of everything that was needed to fight this war. And Asa Philip Randolph and the great Anna Arnold Hedgeman, I'm looking over at her memoir, the sister who many people don't know was in Minnesota. They approached Roosevelt. Hey, man, you need to desegregate the military and the jobs in the military. Roosevelt was like, okay, well, make me do it. They was going to march on Washington in 1941. They called off the march when Franklin Roosevelt signed an executive order which desegregated wartime jobs. And that's how Negroes left the South and went to the Bay Area, Oakland, got jobs in shipyards. They would get mortgages for houses, send their children to college, LA, Seattle, Philadelphia, in the shipyards and places like that, places like New York, Buffalo, New York, not just New York City, Cleveland, Detroit, all them people from Detroit, from Detroit, your great grandma came from Alabama, that's because they had jobs at the Ford factory, all this kind of things. That was an executive order. The president had the ability to do that. And the second order like that goes back almost a century, about 3/4 of a century before that, the most famous executive order that applied to African people in U.S. history to date. And that's the Emancipation Proclamation. People forget that was an executive order. So, I mean, executive orders aren't new, although I think they may be used kind of new in this current administration in a way that is unprecedented. Forget political party. Just think about presidential power, and you can see how unprecedented these executive orders are.
Well, I don't think that people understand the way government works, and I think Karen Hunter
Yeah, my friend.
had a funny quote, and she was like, "This really sucks as a way to find out how civic actually works." Because again, people don't know, right? The power of the president. Like the first thing people are like, can he do that? Can he do all that? I'm like, he's the head of the federal government. Now he has to contend with Congress. Yes, he has to contend with Congress. He has to contend with the Senate.
That's exactly right.
Judiciary that has to come into play if this all gets taken up to into court. All of that has to come into play. But letting people know, even when you talk about understanding civics, there was a reason in this man's first term why the judges were such a big thing, where he was appointing people to what courts they were in, because for him, if this ever goes to battle, he has to have and wants to have the numbers on his side. Like he knows that. He knew that. So can he do these executive orders? Absolutely. Can Congress fight? Absolutely. Can it go to the Senate? Yes. Can it go to court? Yes. But where are his supporters and where are the numbers? But let's get into one of his executive orders and the Blackest months.
Blackest, that's right. The Blackest History Month. Because next month we're going to talk about Black women in Black Women's History Month. Everybody's in March is Black Women's History Month. Yes.
Yes. Technically, I love how you say it's Black Women's History Month.
Yeah, we just put Black on everything now. We already got Black August. That's August. We talked about Black. I mean, come on, it just makes perfect sense. Everything is great. We have Black Asian Pacific, American Indian. We got Black Indian, Seminoles, and Cherokee. So every month is Black. It's just the Blackest. That's all. Yes.
Don't play with us.
Don't play with us. For playing, you be playing with yourself. It's unfortunate.
Oh my goodness. But of course, folks are talking about this DEI executive order, and partially because people have chosen that to do away with anything Black and anything gay. Like, that's what it is. Cut it. Even though DEI affects way more than just racial and gender issues, so much more. We're talking about people with disabilities. We're talking about our vets. It affects so much more. Absolutely. But people have been, been brazen and bolden to talk about we doing everything Black, everything gay. He said DI is also all of that is off and out. Meaning, so the Department of Defense, right, has chosen to cancel Black History Month celebrations. Mm-hmm. So
not just Black History Month, we got a whole list. The Christian soldier, Pete Hegseth. And I'm not saying that because he's a Christian soldier, because obviously he's not, but because he is a Christian extremist. And anybody who says he isn't, check the tattoo on his arm and look up that big cross with the 4 crosses around it and understand that he is an unashamed, unapologetic endorser of Christian extremism, and that extremism violates a fundamental principle that is enshrined in the Constitution of the United States, which calls for the separation of church and state. It's called the Establishment Clause. So they're in violation of a lot of federal laws. But yeah, Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, now head of the Pentagon, so this isn't a partisan issue at all. It isn't Democrat, Republican, Independent. It's a question of ideologues who are absolutely in violation of the federal Constitution. And so canceling celebrations, sure, you have the authority to do that. Ideologically trying to impose a very, not only a concept of whiteness, but a very narrow, very minority extremist view. You can't stop people from observing whatever they want to observe. You may be able to impose restrictions on what they can do on quote unquote your time. And you might even go through and do some things that are in your purview that just mean-spirited and ultimately undermine. You talk about wanting to have the integrity of your military. The chief of staff of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is an African man, a man of African descent, who was over the Secretary of the Air Force. He will probably get rid of him, not because he is incompetent, because the ultimate DEI, in fact, the only diversity, equity, and inclusion concept that I acknowledge historically is whiteness. Because only in whiteness can you be thoroughly unqualified for your job, Madam Press Secretary, Secretary of Defense, National Intelligence, Health and Human Services, Secretary of the Treasury. Only in whiteness can you be thoroughly unqualified, but in the diversity of whiteness, you get the equity of being able to bring your incompetent ass into a position, and you are included. So the only DEI that I recognize is whiteness. But what you're talking about with us is simply making fairness. When they say DEI, what we mean by that is fairness. But when we say DEI, what we mean is whiteness. That's the only diversity, equity, and inclusion. Whiteness is an illusion everybody got included in.
Absolutely. And there's a conversation to be had, even when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, this illusion that somehow this has elevated or helped Black people gain some type of unfair advantages, when we know, and I'm going to say it for the numbers people out here, that white women are the biggest recipients of DEI programs.
Which means they're included more in whiteness. They already had that DEI. All this DEI did was superannuate, weaponize the DEI that already existed. We're diverse. Come on, white women. Wait, what just happened? Well, whiteness is the only DEI. Thank you for helping us include women in. Yeah, of course. Linda McMahon, Secretary of Education, the wrestling. Wait, let me not do that. Because they may be having stop fights at the department. I don't know. At some point, you got to make a commercial. I mean, the jokes write themselves if it weren't so serious. If it weren't so serious.
That's a good, if it wasn't so serious. Yeah. It's still like unbelievable. A bunch of this is just laughable, just straight laughable. And then you can't forget about these corporations that once this DEI proclamation was put out here, the corporations that was like, oh, we don't got to include Black people no more. Bye. Insane.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
Until we say don't buy, at which point they get a little nervous. Like, wait, what just happened? Yeah. Well, I mean, it's and it's interesting because, as you said, I mean, very simply put, when the president of the United States, who doesn't have the authority or the power to act beyond the executive branch, one of three branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial. Legislative is the first branch mentioned in the Constitution. It is Article 1. Article 2 is the presidency, the executive, and Article 3, of course, is the judiciary. When he does that, the courts now have to decide how far the power of the Article 1 powers extend. A lot of this is throwing, as Steve Bannon, one of the chief architects of white nationalism in the world right now, is saying, throw everything against the wall, and then we'll go to the courts, which is why picking the court, the judges are important, as you said. By the way, footnote, I am not one of those people who says, oh yeah, okay, we've learned and let's move forward. No, I am all about shaming every one of you Negroes that stayed home, every one of you radicals that said both parties are the same, and every one of you caping for third-party candidates that couldn't win. I am here to shame you. Do you know why? Because you didn't get involved and you claimed that you wanted a different kind of world. And I'm not saying Democrat, Republican, or independent, third party, any of that. What I'm saying is this: when candidates tell you what they are going to do, and then you make the deliberate decision not to participate, you are voting for an agenda that whoever wins comes out to. So this agenda that's being imposed now, you voted for this. I didn't vote. Yes, that means you voted for this because the people who wanted it voted for it. The people who got confused and didn't know voted for it. And the people who didn't want it voted against it. So I'm just saying that this is the world that we voted for. Everybody voted, even if you didn't go to the ballot. Nobody tells you who to vote for. But if you don't like what's going on now, just understand this is how elections work. Elections have consequences. So what they're doing now is signing all these executive orders. The courts will sort them out. Most of what has been signed so far is going to be thrown out by the courts. But the diversity executive order, followed by actions that are absolutely in the bailiwick under Article 2 of the executive branch, those things send what we might call a chilling effect through. What does that mean? A company that is not beholden to the federal government decides, as you said, oh, that's the signal coming from the president of the United States? No problem. Now we're going to cancel this. Now we're going to do all this. Or if they say we're not going to cancel it, we're going to lean into it. And some companies have already said they're going to lean into it. Some companies are trying to straddle the fence. I see the National Football League decided to take up the end racism stuff that they had in the end zone because the president of the United States says for the first time in U.S. history, a president's going to come to the Super Bowl. And they've got One of these guys dancing around at halftime screaming, "They're not like us." And I'm like, who is they and who are us, my friend? Because they just took up the end racism part on the same end zone or the same field you dancing talking about they and us. Not quite sure what you're talking about, Kendrick, although I appreciate the effort. The point is this: the NFL trying to straddle the fence. You got a whole field full of black ball players, but you pick up the end racism not because you are legally obligated to, but because the president sent a chilling effect, sent this message out. That's not a question of law. It's a question of ideology. And in reserve, if you don't bow down to end these programs that try to include non-white people in your company, in scholarships, in opportunities that people have earned, but have been blocked because of race or gender or other forms of discrimination, now we see the shareholders coming off the sidelines saying that because you have diversity programs, the stock in this company has declined. So now we're going to sue as shareholders saying that you are taking money out of our pockets because we invested in your company and now the stocks are down because you have diversity programs. And so they're trying to force people to get rid of diversity programs who are even saying we're going to defy any trend in society and move to keep our diversity programs. So it isn't that what the president did was illegal in this specific executive order. It's that it's sending a message. It emboldens racists and it scares the people who aren't racist.
Mm-hmm. The bat signal has been sent.
Yes.
The dog whistle has been sent.
The dog whistle. The dog screamed. The dog whooped, howled at the moon. It ain't even quiet no more. Everybody can hear it. No question.
No, he howled at the moon, child.
Howled at the moon. Crazy.
It is. It's absolutely insane. Insane what's happening. So then the other thing that I ponder about with these executive orders, and thank you for shedding light on how that works. How are these executive orders going to affect education? What does this come down to when we're talking about the classroom and the education and the content or rights? We're still at a point in education where we're fighting to teach our children, Black children, about themselves and fighting to teach white children the truth about the world that they live in, the world that they came from. We're still in a point of education where Black male educators are still less than 2% of educators in the field. So when you think about DEI, diversity and inclusion or special programs, right now, right, if someone was to create a program and want federal money to help expose Black boys to the education field, they would be in violation of the executive order. But again, you already spoke in terms of the reasons and the things that folks, it's okay for you to sing and dance and play football, but it's not okay for you to be an educator. But I would love to just delve in a little bit with you about how these executive orders are going to affect the state of education, specifically Black education.
Well, that's a tough one. The Department of Education, much of its authority rests in a couple of big buckets. One, in terms of K-12, kindergarten, 12th grade, is about policy. It's about standards. They don't have any power of enforcement necessarily, but they have the power to say these would be like target standards for nutrition, target standards for test scores and many things like that. But the big problem you have post-secondary, post-12th grade for high school graduates who are going to college is student loans. You're talking about $1.7 trillion in federal student loans that the Department of Education is charged with administering. Now, what the current administration is saying is, well, the Treasury Department can take over student loans and managing student loans because the ultimate goal, well, a couple of things. As we said, Article 1 in the Constitution is legislative. 2 is executive. 3 is judiciary. Congress has the power of the purse. The president of the United States doesn't have a dime in public money that he or she can spend. It has to be authorized by Congress, and that's through legislation or bills, as we know. So the Department of Education is funded by Congress. The president signs the law, but Congress is the one that passes that bill through the House and through the Senate. So the president of the United States cannot abolish the Department of Education. What he can do is shrink the ask for the budget. Now, Congress could expand that ask, but ultimately the president, and in the current configuration, there's one party that has control of all 3 branches. Well, 2 branches technically, and then the third, they have a lot of judges that have been appointed, particularly the Supreme Court. People like to say, well, the judges aren't Republican or Democrat. Yeah, look who picked them and look what they decide. Don't get cute. But at any rate, the point is that at least technically 2 of the 3 branches are under control of the Republican Party at this point. So the current president of the United States could say, well, I can't close the Department of Education, but I can recommend that it get right now, let's say 5 or 10% of its funding. There are 4 branches of government. Wait, 4 or 3? There are 3, right? Exactly. There is no 4th branch of government. So somebody who nobody voted for, Elon Musk, has been running around up in government buildings with a bunch of young boys trying to get his hands on computers and your payroll, social security number under something called Doge. that is not a branch of the federal government. And Elon Musk is not an actor of the federal government. Now, they put him on part-time status so he can work like a third of a year, maybe not even consecutive days to try to get around that. But the simple fact of the matter is, which is why they went to the 3rd branch, the courts. In the last couple of weeks, the lawsuits have lined up so that people have said, you can't have access to our payroll records, Mr. Private Citizen. The president didn't have that authority to give you access. And then the lawsuits have lined up to say, you want all these federal employees to quit their job? No, the unions have advised all the people, do not quit your job. Do not quit your job. And then say, now we go into court to say that you can't get rid of people arbitrarily without going through hearings, and you got to show cause. So all that, everybody's saying, oh my God, no, calm down. What this fool is doing is testing the limits of executive authority. There are 3 branches of government. When it comes to education, then, if you're going to move the administration of federal student loans out of the Department of Education, you're threatening the people who rely on student loans to go to school. Never mind the fact that under the previous administration, there was an attempt for a student loan forgiveness that this administration will no doubt say, not only are we not going to forgive any of these loans, we're going to try to go into your bank account and get whatever you had from loan forgiveness before we came in back. So this is, oh my God, what just happened? This is the kind of thing you need to be concerned about. Now, and you're sitting, and in ending diversity, now what you also want to try to do. And now, mind you, I should also mention this, that the 3rd section of the federal Constitution, after the 2nd section, which is on the 3 branches of government, the 3rd section is called Limitations on State Sovereignty. Because remember, there's one party in this country that says, we want to give things back to the states. We want to give things back to the states. The current president said, we want to get rid of FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, and return that to the states. First of all, to be returned to the states, it would have had to have been in the states in the first place. You should probably take a little time. Probably should pay a little bit more attention in elementary school. But at any rate, the whole idea is you're going to turn over federal disaster relief to states. It doesn't even make any sense. Some of this you just talking. But when it comes to education, the idea is let's return education to the states. Okay. Until you get control of the federal government. And now you want to go into every state and look into curriculum. Look at what the teachers are teaching. Look at teacher development. You can't do that, my friend. That is illegal. You cannot go in and dictate policy on education to the states, because if you had read Part 3 of the Constitution, Limitations on State Sovereignty, as particularly Article 4 of the Constitution, which is on states, you would find out that you don't have the authority to do it. So how do you push back? It's quite simple. Write your curriculum. See, the state I was born in, Tennessee, is currently run by blood red white nationalists. So they're going to try to interfere. They've already done it. In fact, they're introducing new legislation now to try to take federal money and give it to private schools through the form of vouchers and charters. Now, the Department of Education can also send that signal in policy that they support vouchers and they support the charter schools. And that is absolutely what Linda McMahon, Secretary of Education, is going to do. But in Maryland, it's going to be a different conversation. In California, New York, and Pennsylvania, it's going to be a different conversation. What we're about to see is a cold civil war in this country between states on the issue of education. So if you're watching this, and there are many thousands who are below what I call the cotton curtain. So if you're in Mississippi or South Carolina, or Louisiana, or Florida, what we going to do? What you're going to do is get organized. Because just like states have the power of education, so do cities, so do counties, so do localities. So you need to go to those school board meetings. That's how Moms for Liberty got started. They started going to school board meetings. You can take a page from the playbook, and what you'll reveal is there are no red states or blue states. There are human beings. I'm sorry, Barack Obama. He said there's no red states or blue states. It's just the United States. That's a cute phrase. I don't know what the hell it means. There are no red or blue states. There are people in the United States who can go at the local level and get involved. If you don't want people who ain't got no children in the schools busting up at the meetings talking about you got to take Beloved and the Bluest Eye out your library, you need to go to the meeting and say you want the Harriet Tubman books in the library, that your baby wants to learn about Queen Nzinga and ancient Egypt and wants to know more about the local history. Then you go to the school board meeting. You don't win this fight in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. You win the fight at that school around the house, around the corner from your house.
What happens if I'm outnumbered though? What happens if I'm at the school board and it's me and two other blacks?
See, that's the other ugly trick. The ugly trick is convincing people that they're outnumbered. Say, but I am outnumbered. There's only 3 of us in the community. Hey, you don't live where we live, and you watching this right now, meaning what? You have allies. See, the thing about it is, even if you don't have enough people in your physical area, you have a network that you can absolutely access. When we look at these various platforms that are organized to help people acquire resources, then you know that you have allies. If you can't change the school board in your area, if you can't change the local public library in your area, are there not community centers and churches? Are there not meetings in people's houses? We got so many resources now. The technology. We have the technology. If you want to have study groups in your house or in your apartment with children while you're fighting the other political fights, because it's not either or, then you can do that right now. In fact, Dr. Woodson, and we talked about this before, if you go back and look at the pipeline, you know, when we wrote the lesson for the Philadelphia School District for the mandatory African American Studies, African American History course that now high school students have to take, the lesson I wrote on Carter G. Woodson includes what Woodson says everybody can do as activities in February. He gave a 15 activities that people can do. Number 4, and I'll read from it. It says, have each pupil write his, and I'll say her there, write his, her, their family history, where they live today, where their parents and grandparents lived, why they moved elsewhere, what they were doing at the time, and what they are doing today. Anybody tells you that you can't write your family history has lost whatever little mind they have left. So if you can't win at the school board, go home and get the old people, put them next to the young people and say, interview your grandma and let's write the family history. You don't have to wait on somebody to learn your history. And while you are still fighting, but don't ever feel hopeless.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest points for people to take away from today's episode is like, you don't need permission.
No.
Does it seem nice to have a statewide, recognized, unified effort in celebrating Blackness? Absolutely, right? The country you want to feel respected and feel loved by the country you live in. I can understand the longing for that, but you don't need anybody's permission to tell you how to learn about yourself, what you can know about yourself. Just don't need that. And I think that people need to understand that. I think a lot of times it's human nature. We focus more on the problem than the solution. Right? Executive order came out, DEI erased. All right, cool. What are we going to do? What are we going to continue to do? And we need to continue to, some of us, do what we always been doing. Still learning, still growing, still being in community. But I think that that's really important in a time like this for people to realize. Like, you don't got to be up in arms just yet.
No.
Still got to organize. We still got to stay in communication.
Yeah.
We still got to be on a path to freedom and liberation.
Still got to participate.
Yes. And I mean, we don't never really address this crowd on this particular show, but a question I have before we wrap up is, in this current administration, right, with all the things that are going on,
mm-hmm.
What is even the benefit, or is the only benefit for some of the poor class or working class whites
mm-hmm.
to hold on or to idolize somebody like Donald Trump? Is it just the symbol of what they feel like whiteness means?
Yes. What's the last one? No, that was easy. Yes.
What is your benefit?
That is the benefit. Whiteness is the benefit. My man Gerald Horne, the great historian, as far as I'm concerned, perhaps the greatest historian we have writing today, working today. Gerald likes to say that whiteness is the battle pay that handful of rich people gave to poor whites to serve as a buffer between the poor whites and all the rest of us. Whiteness is battle pay. In other words, I don't have health care. I don't have good education. I'm drowning in debt. I can't, and I need somebody to blame. and they told me that it was you, and so therefore I'm going to blame you. So what do you get from that? Well, I get the feeling that I'm somehow part of these rich people. But you don't have any money? No, but we're white. And that makes me better. Yes, I'm poor like you're poor, but I'm not poor and black. As James Baldwin said, it must be terrible to live your life in a way that makes you feel good because you're not, thank heaven, me. Whiteness is the illusion. It's the sickness. It's a mental illness.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But I know somebody listening to this is going to be screaming then, what about all these non-whites that held on and voted and uphold this administration? What's the benefit in that?
Well, I think we're all seeing those people crying on social media.
We are.
Saying they were hoodwinked, bamboozled, run them up, led astray. And, as much as we don't want to laugh, there's more of a feeling that we do want to laugh. It's sad. Because we should feel bad for those people, but there are a lot of people who don't. I feel bad for them, but not bad enough to get fooled again by this. And plus, there was some trickery going on as well. I mean, a lot of people who were saying that they were caping for the Palestinians, for example, went silent. I'm thinking now places like Dearborn, Michigan. Some of those people were always going to vote the other way, but they saw this as a wedge issue. And, again, this isn't partisan. This is a human rights issue. You've led a mass slaughter in a region of the world, an indeterminate slaughter, children, non-combatants, people, indeterminate slaughter. You've bombed people into either you've killed them or completely destroyed their homes. Then you get on a plane. I'm talking about the Prime Minister of Israel, currently under warrant by the International Criminal Court, and you give a golden pager to the President of the United States, who just finished saying he wants to turn the West Gaza into a resort, a French Riviera in the region. And this man, under a warrant from International Criminal Court, gives the President of the United States a golden pager in an insult. Forget political party, a human insult, because it was pagers that the Israelis sent that exploded in the hand. And you gave this man a golden This is giving a middle finger to every human who breathes. And so those who were so vocal before the election to say you must stand with these Palestinians and human solidarity, who have gone silent now. Wait, so were you in? Because this right here is worse than anything that happened before. Why aren't you talking? Oh, maybe you never were for the pastor. Maybe you just went, okay. So for the non-whites who thought that this was going to be something else, all I would say is that you have a brain, and next time you should do better. But in the meantime, you should probably either be quiet, or if you want to say now we need to do something different, I'm gonna need to see that. I don't need to hear you talking about it. I'm gonna need to see you act differently, because I'm not convinced at all. Stupidity is a hell of a thing, and it can be cured. You're trying to cure it 1 hour at a time on the pipeline.
I do be trying, Doc. I really do.
Succeed, hopefully.
But we know people don't see past performative acts, and a lot of those folks who were boycotting voting or against Democrats because of Palestine, I never understood the premise or the concept, because it's not like the Republicans were offering anything different as it turns to Palestine, right? Like they want to say wing lift. So,
yeah,
like you said, there's consequences to the vote.
Yeah, no question. No question.
We're experiencing that right now.
No question.
All of us, but not understanding how minorities could see this administration and uphold it in any way as a benefit to you. I'm just curious. I want to end on a note of us celebrating, and loving and being super black, being extra black this month. So I would just love for you to just give the space real quick to shout out and uphold some of your favorite ancestors, and some of our unsung heroes.
You first.
I want you to go.
Yeah, but you got to tell us two, and I'll tell you two.
Well, one of mine is, I don't want to say cliche, is cliche in the Black liberation movement if you talk about Malcolm X. And I think when I'm looking at the times that we live in right now, drawing on some of his philosophies and some of his strengths, just about how we as a people have to do for ourselves, and we as a people have to be in the business of knowing and loving ourselves. And even when you know his history and knowing who funded Malcolm X's, I mean, you could call it a campaign, but how this man was able to survive and preach and do for Black people. Black billionaires and millionaires and folks got together to help that brother do that. And I think in these times, we have to think strategically in that way. So definitely my brother Malcolm X. And I'm gonna save my women for next month. So when we do
For Black Women's History Month, right? We're gonna have no question. All right. Well,
I'm gonna save my women for next month.
Okay.
But let me hear one of yours.
Let's see. One of mine would be John Henry Clark. I think he comes to mind because I knew Dr. Clark. We just came back from Columbus, Georgia, where he is buried. He and his sister, when we were with his last living niece and nephew and the rest of their family. We were celebrating the anniversary, the 110th anniversary of his birth. My mother's people are from down there, so I went to the cemetery to see them. We always call our ancestors. But Dr. Clark, because he was born in U.S. apartheid in Jim Crow in 1915, he hoboed his way to New York City at 18 years old, and he lived a life as an African in the world, this man from the South of the United States. And he was a master teacher. And if nothing else, I learned from John Clark, who taught so many people, including a young brother named Lou Alcindor from Power Memorial High School, who we now know as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar there in New York, who talks about Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark always reminded us that as African people, we are part of a world. We were the first people in the world. And we should not only always remember that, we should never let anybody try to force us to forget it, because we created the world we live in today. And in many ways, we might be the ones that have to save it. And he's just a testament to the fact that it doesn't matter where you were born, where you came from. If you are committed to studying and in your generosity of spirit, connecting one life to another life, you can change the whole world. And so Dr. Clark is always a model of mine. So I'll raise it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give one more and then we're gonna wrap.
Please.
Last one for living in these times. I want folks to look at and think about the life of Fred Hampton as well. I know that sometimes we talk about Black Panthers and folks talking about them in a very revolutionary way and only think about the party for self-defense. But if we look at the life of Brother Fred Hampton and how he was about bringing folks together to fight against the system, right, that we're currently in, like finding commonalities in our struggles, I think that that's important for us to also walk away with living in today's times. So I would hope that people are using Black History Month to be educated, to be encouraged by the stories of our ancestors, to find strength, to draw on power from those stories. History always repeats itself. So the things that we're going through is not new. We've always been in the movement of struggle. We've always been in the movement of resistance. But we have to keep the path forward on freedom and liberation. So educate yourselves. Again, find stories and find strength in our ancestors to move the path forward. So, Doc, I always want to thank you for coming on. We missed you so much.
We miss you. Well, we back now. You back rolling. So the baby that got your age where you can snatch away a little time from here to there. We're glad to have you back because we need you on this road to liberation. We got to have our guide holding that light up. So it's always good to be back. I love you. And
I love you too. Yeah. I appreciate you, Doc. Well, shout out to all our co-conspirators out there listening and watching. We'll be back again. And want to thank you for listening to
Philly. The Octavius Caddo Scholars. I'm repping the people from CCP, Community College Philadelphia, the Caddo Scholars. So I just wanted to say that. I was wearing my Caddo Scholars. We had to go Philly style. But anyway.
Yes. Philly style, free education.
Yes.
Shout out to the Caddo Scholars.
Yes.
I love it. But thank you guys for listening to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast, a show that is hosted by the Center for Black Educator Development in conjunction with our partners at Brightbeam. So subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We'll see you here again. Peace, guys.